It's just taking longer. Okay, here we go. All right, we're ready when you are.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 10:01 a.m. I will read the Land Acknowledgement Act. The city of Thorold is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Hattawadirak, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The city of Thorold stands with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. I'll go to item number 3 now, declaration of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay, seeing none, I'll go to number 4, adoption of the agenda. Can I get a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda? Moved by Mark and seconded by Linda. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That's unanimous. Do we not have minutes to accept, Justin?
No, we do not for this month.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm going to go to item number 5, presentations. This is Walker Industries' proposed South Landfill Phase 2 project. I'll now call on Darren Fry, Project Director, Walker Industries, presenting regarding the proposed South Landfill Phase 2 project. Welcome, Darren. The meeting is yours now.
Yes, well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. As noted, my name is Darren Fry, and I'm a Project Director with Walker Environmental. And happy to spend a few minutes talking about our plans to continue to operate our South Landfill and manage residual waste here in Niagara. Maybe just a quick administrative question. Justin, would you like me to share screen and present the presentation?
Yes, if you like, that would be easier if you're able to.
Absolutely. Okay, everyone should hopefully be able to see that now. So we'll proceed. So really quickly, I'm just going to touch on a few points. I know we've only got a few minutes and of course, happy to answer any questions, but I'll try to provide a really brief overview of Walker and our Niagara Resource Management Campus. I'll then introduce the South Landfill Phase 2 project and speak a little bit to the approvals process. And last but not least, just ensure that we provided information for follow-up discussions. So really quickly, I don't need to dwell. I'm sure most folks are familiar with Walker, but as a 5th-generation family-owned business based here in Niagara, Walker's played along an important role here in the community. And interesting stat: when I joined the company over 20 years ago, there was about maybe 200 of us, and today there's around 1,200 employees with operations coast to coast. It's important to note that we are committed to resource recovery. And you'll see that, I think, in the presentation, and I have provided some supplementary information in the agenda materials as well. But it's also important to recognize that we also provide solutions to manage waste that can't be reused or recycled. And then I'll talk a little bit as well about our integrated resource management campus based in Niagara Falls and Thorold, in fact. And of course, this campus sits on the municipal boundary. Our compost facilities are in Thorold, and a number of other facilities are in Niagara Falls. And we've been safely providing a number of recycling, resource recovery, and residual waste management solutions and services for Niagara for a number of decades. Just a really quick overview of the campus, and maybe I'll take this opportunity to offer a tour. We do a number of tours through the campus. I think last year the count was over 100, and that's community groups, that's advisory councils like yourselves, it's school groups, professional groups, you name it. So it's an open door. If there is interest, happy to host a tour around the campus. This just provides a quick overview of some of the different operations located at the campus. So we have our our compost facility, I think that's item B. Our head office is highlighted. Number of different operations, quarry operations, of course, both active and closed landfill operations, rehabilitation projects where we've worked with academia to look at innovative end uses of landfills once closed. And of course, we have a number of resource recovery operations where we look to find new ways to divert materials that would be destined to landfill and create sustainable products from that. And also we have a very large landfill gas to energy facility located on the campus. And I'll just pause here, looking at our current, the two H's, the two-letter H's on the screen. So the one on the left, that's our current phase, the current operations of our South landfill. And to the right is the proposed second phase of our South landfill, which is within the footprint of a currently operating quarry, which will soon be depleted, and hence the plans to look at developing a landfill in that industrial or quarry footprint. So really quickly, just highlighting, and I thought this was helpful, just to provide some background and some imagery around what a modern landfill looks like first and foremost, but important to note. So this is a picture here on the right of our South landfill. This is the liner, so the base liner being constructed, the different types of membranes and low permeability clays and granular materials used. The liner system, just for some perspective, is around 12 feet thick. In the background of that picture on the right is the proposed phase 2 footprint. So a few quick notes. Walker provides, again, as I noted, essential infrastructure, services, and products here in Niagara, and we want to continue to provide that. So we've looked at, as our current landfill, the South Landfill Phase 1, has approximately 6 years of capacity remaining. It's time to begin planning and looking from a longer term perspective, what are some other options to continue to manage residual waste here in Niagara? And so hence looking at the footprint located to the east of our current operations. And it's important to note that not a lot really changes from our current operations in phase 1. We're not proposing to increase or change the amount of daily waste received or annual limits, nor the type of waste, or really the operational life. The South landfill currently had a operational life of about 20 years, and phase 2 would provide an additional 20 years of waste disposal capacity for Niagara. Other things like the site entrance and traffic patterns won't change. So not a lot changes with the exception of moving the active landfilling operations slightly to the east. Just a few more key facts. So our current landfill and the proposed landfill would receive solid non-hazardous waste. It would provide approximately 18 million cubic meters. And as part of the EA process, things like that volume may change depending on the design of the site. And, a good example would be based on community feedback, maybe the height of the landfill will be a little bit lower than. So things will change throughout this planning process, which I'll describe shortly. But we're targeting approximately a 20-year operational life. And it's important to note as well that the landfill currently supports around 500 jobs at the campus, and that would continue through the development of phase 2. And last but not least, and I think I touch on it, but our current landfill gas to energy facilities where we generate electricity on site, we powered the paper mill in Thorold, the former Resolute or Abitibi paper mill for 15 years. We're currently powering the General Motors facility, the Glendale facility. And most recently, we've developed our renewable natural gas facility. So in total, the current campus powers the equivalent of about 25,000 homes. Significant, and that would be the case for the next 20 years. Phase 2 would look to add the equivalent amount of renewable energy from the capture of methane from the landfill, adding another 10,000 homes to that total. So a significant source of renewable energy in the community. This is more an infographic. I won't go into great detail, but it just provides a little bit of information around what a modern engineered landfill looks like. It's important to note Ontario, in fact, has some of the strictest groundwater protection laws in North America. And you can see that on the right, that's that liner system that I talked about, but a number of other things, including landfill gas control, stormwater management, etc. So a little bit of information here, and happy to answer any questions either after my presentation, or again, happy to have one-on-one conversations at any point through this planning process. And it's important to note also that this facility plays a really important role in Niagara for managing residual waste in Niagara. And so in fact, as you can see here, about 75% of Niagara's waste is managed by our South landfill. Some residual or some additional material goes to the US, primarily New York, and the Niagara Region landfills, so Humberstone, in fact, and a smaller facility out in Grimsby, where I live, manages waste as well. So this facility will play an important role in the future, especially as Niagara is set to grow. Really quickly, the approvals process, there's really three main steps, and we're at the very start of that first step, and that's the environmental assessment approvals. So under the Environmental Assessment Act, that is the first and overarching approval process. We've just started that in November, and that traditionally is about a 3 to 4 year process. Following the environmental assessment approvals, there's a number of approvals under the Environmental Protection Act. Those are your operating permits for the facility. Also, any stormwater discharge approvals under Ontario Water Resources Act, or air emission approvals. And of course, local approvals. So any official plan amendment or bylaw amendments required. So three main steps in total. It takes on average up to 8 years to seek or obtain the necessary approvals. So as you can see, lots of dialogue still to come, lots of opportunities for feedback to help incorporate community input into the design of this facility. A little bit more detail. So in the environmental assessment process, we're on the left. So there's two main steps in an EA, environmental assessment. There is the terms of reference, which is where we're at right now. And the terms of reference is simply a roadmap or a blueprint that outlines what we propose to do to study the facility and the project, and how we will do that. So that sets the stage for ultimately doing the studies that will come at the next step. So we are currently in the draft terms of reference review period, so that second milestone on your left. And ultimately, the terms of reference must be approved by the minister before a proponent is permitted to go and do the studies. And that's simply just laying out all of the different studies that will occur, how consultation will occur. Just a quick overview of a number of the different studies. So the definition of the environment in the Environmental Assessment Act is very broad. So it includes everything like, of course, ecology, the natural environment, economic impacts, noise, air quality, agricultural, archaeology, and social impacts, the use and enjoyment of lands in the community. So a very broad and encompassing and a comprehensive study, but a really important step right now as we gather community input to make sure that we're going to do the studies to answer any questions that come forward. And that is the intent of the terms of reference. So lots of ways to stay engaged and provide information. We have a great project website, southlandfillphase2.com, 1-800 phone number, email, of course, public events at key milestones, and my role and a number of my colleagues' role is to engage the community, look for opportunities to sit down with near neighbors if it is over kitchen table chats, engage committees like yourself, business partners, Indigenous communities, etc. So feel free to engage, share the word. We are seeking input on the project, of course, and look forward to answering any questions that may come up. And so I've just provided some additional slides here, really as reference if required, but no need to get into those slides at the moment. So I will stop sharing and happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. Very good presentation, informative. Are there any questions for the presenter? I see Councillor O'Hare with his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Darren. Darren, thank you for coming in and explaining the project, the future project. very clear and well done. Thank you. I have a couple of questions. The first one is at the present time, what is your percentage of methane capture from the site?
Well, thank you, Councillor. That's a great question, in fact, and that's a tricky number to really nail down. And without getting into too much detail, it's often hard to determine the exact amount of methane being generated at any given time. So what we do is we can model that, and we can use a lot of experience. Generally accepted rule for a landfill, highly engineered with a bottom liner, good maintenance, a good cap, and a landfill gas utilization facility is around 85 to 90%. It's important to note we are highly motivated to capture that methane. It's a business opportunity for us. And in fact, General Motors calls all the time to ask for more gas to power their engines to make electricity, or Enbridge for more renewable natural gas. While we don't know that, what's happening is as technology and new regulations that are on the horizon to monitor the landfill for any fugitive emissions. So while we don't know the denominator, how much gas is generated at any given time, we know what we're collecting, but now we can start to use drones, actually satellite imagery, to determine, are there any methane plumes or leaks that we're observing that we can then go and either add more cap or add more gas collection wells and move that number maybe up into the 95, 98% collection efficiency range.
Okay, thank you. One more question. You said there's 6 years approximately left on the phase one landfill site. What happens after that to phase one?
So phase one, at about 2 years minus the end date, we'll begin a conversation and consultation with the community around the end use of that facility. There's a number of different options, whether it be passive recreational use, agricultural use, just renaturalization. So we'll begin a conversation around what that closure of the landfill looks like. Closure of a landfill in Ontario it requires the installation of a thick clay cap and vegetative cover. So to minimize the amount of precipitation that infiltrates into the waste, you want to shed that water, prevent it from coming into contact with any waste underlying. But the end use of that property, it can be defined through consultation with the community. So it could be a greenfield, it could be forested to some degree. I'll note the east landfill on the campus, which was closed, the southern part, which was closed in 2009. Through some of that input we received from some community members around, can you farm on it? That before that property was a quarry, before it was a landfill, someone's relative farmed on it. So we didn't know the answer to it, but we embarked on a 5-year study with the University of Guelph and determined that, yes, you can safely farm on top of a closed landfill by thickening the cap and continuing. And we've been safely working with a local Thorold company, Beaverlock Farms, to farm on top of the landfill. So really innovative end use.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, we'll go to Linda. You've got your hand up.
Yeah, and has any consideration ever been made to create a facility to burn some of this non-hazardous waste? Because the ash, once the ash is there, it takes up a whole lot less space, and would give a landfill site a longer life, and we would need less of them.
Yes. Well, thank you, Linda. So thermal treatment or incineration is I would say, is a common form of managing residual waste. It has been considered by Walker, and there's a number of reasons why we have opted not to pursue that option at this location. I'd be happy to maybe get into those details a little bit more. But largely from an economic perspective, based on the type of waste that we receive. So there are 2 incinerators in Ontario currently operating. They manage about 5% of Ontario's waste. So landfill is kind of the preferred disposal method. Happy to chat about the pros and cons and the rationale behind not pursuing an incinerator at this facility. It's not something Walker has done before. There are, of course, benefits, pros and cons, but we're very familiar with landfill as a safe and reliable means of waste disposal.
And where are the incinerators in Canada or Ontario?
Yes, in Ontario, the municipalities of York and Durham have an incinerator that was, I believe, developed maybe about 10 years ago. And there is a private incinerator in, I believe, Brampton called the Emerald Waste Facility, so just outside of Toronto.
Well, it would make sense for have incinerators there instead of Toronto creating massive landfills all over Ontario with their waste. Anyway, thank you very much. Darren, would an incinerator be considered for the Niagara area? Would Walker consider it at some time? Not just for this facility, but for any facility.
Potentially, different waste streams. There are benefits for thermal treatment. One thing I would just note, I've got 2 young daughters, and climate change does concern me greatly. And unfortunately, incinerators burn plastic, which is a anthropogenic or a human source of plastic. It's non-renewable. So we have to take into a number of considerations as how we manage our current waste streams and future waste streams.
Can the smoke and things that came off of the plastics when they're burning, can that be captured or not?
To my knowledge, Ontario has strict emissions regulations, but to my knowledge, I don't believe there's technologies that capture the CO2, so the greenhouse gas component of the emissions. I'm not an incinerator expert, so I will just qualify that statement.
Well, I'm neither either. I'm just asking questions of interest. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Linda. We're going to go with Mark now. He's got his hand up.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dick, for your presentation. Is it possible to throw up that slide again that shows, it's the overall slide that showed on the right-hand side what the liner looked like? And describe for me in just a sentence or so as to what is involved with that liner? Because looking at the picture you showed, yeah, that one. Looking at the picture, it just looked like it was just a few millimeters thick of plastic, but you're saying it's 12 feet thick. So what is exactly composed, what makes up that 12 feet? I think it's on the right-hand side there, yeah.
Yes, hopefully you, thank you, Mark. Hopefully you can see that image. So yes, in fact, this image on the right is the liner that's currently used in our phase 1 South Landfill. It is approximately 12 feet thick, and it's comprised of a number of different layers, including low permeability clay, which we have in abundance here in Niagara. If any of us are gardeners or have dug fence posts recently, you're familiar with that. So layers of clay up to 1 meter thick, and on top of those clay layers are membranes, so plastic membranes that are several millimeters thick, and then what are called leachate collection layers. That's the granular layers of clear stone and pipe. So if you think about it, looking at the image, any precipitation that lands on the landfill or lands on the waste, comes in contact with the waste, precipitates through the waste. It must be captured. It is not released to the environment. It is retained on the liner at the very top, just under that granular layer. It's continuously moved and removed. Any of that liquid is continuously pumped from the landfill. It doesn't fill up. It's not a bathtub. That leachate is removed for treatment. Below that plastic layer, that first thin line, black line, is the primary clay layer. And then below that, you see another granular layer with a pipe. That is a secondary, so a redundant layer. If there ever was a failure or a leak in the liner, we have another means of collecting, and we have another multiple feet of membrane, plastic liner, and clay below it again. So this truly is, this is a Ministry of Environment design. This is the Cadillac of liner designs, and it's something Walker takes very seriously as, being a longtime member of this community, but ensuring that groundwater is protected from these facilities for a long, long time.
Okay, thanks for that. I did have a couple other questions, but you've already answered the question about waste incineration, so that's good. Let me ask you, and I hope this terminology is familiar with you. You're familiar with this terminology, but do you look at the landfill, both phase 1 and phase 2, as having a comprehensive landfill gas collection system, a partial landfill gas collection system, or no landfill gas collection system?
Yes, sorry, and I'm just trying to end my share, but I'm not overly familiar with Zoom, so I apologize. So to your question, oh, thank you very much. The proposed gas collection system as part of phase 2, our vision is it would be incorporated into the existing infrastructure. A key component of this of our planning process is to really reuse a lot of existing landfill infrastructure, which includes leachate management, but of course landfill gas. So we would incorporate that into the existing system, and if businesses like General Motors or others, I know BioVeld has expressed interest in that renewable energy resource, or Enbridge. So lots of appetite and interest in the additional gas that would come from phase 2.
Yeah, I understand. My question is specific to, and I'm using, I apologize, I'm using terminology that's actually from the US EPA, okay?
Okay. Yeah.
But they classify landfills as either having a comprehensive landfill gas collection system, partial, or none. So,
this
yeah,
would be a comprehensive gas collection system.
I assume so because you're using it, right? So,
Yep.
okay, but when you talked earlier to answer Councillor O'Hare's question about the percentage of lost methane, you can't specifically answer that question. So just one last question on that, then following up, you had mentioned that there are technologies, whether it be drones or other technologies. Is that something that you are committing to do in the future to measure your leaking methane?
Absolutely, absolutely. And we've commissioned research. We've got 2 research projects actually underway with the University of Carleton. One is identifying the best means. So one thing we can do is we can identify using some ground-based techniques to identify, are there any methane emissions or even odor emissions on given sites or given locations on the site. But these are large properties. So what we're doing is now looking at the use of drones and ensuring we can correlate measurements that we're getting on the ground with drones, because a drone that's flying maybe 5 or 10 meters above ground is susceptible to wind conditions, etc. So we're doing research, and there's a lot. I'm actually speaking at 11 o'clock at a conference here in Niagara Falls, Solid Waste Association of North America, and there's been a lot of conversation. There are new federal guidelines coming down to regulate methane emissions from landfill through the use of drones and other techniques. So a lot of advancements in the coming years, if not even months, on this front. And we are committing to incorporate that technology.
Do you have a timeline for that?
It's underway as we speak at different levels, but that technology is very new. So we're working with the technology vendors and the regulators to ensure that that there's agreement in terms of the accuracy of the data. As again, this is methane measurement is a new technique in science, specifically with landfills. So it's underway as we speak, and it will continue to evolve.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Linda, you still have your hand up. Did you have another question?
Yeah, I did have another question. Darren, do you have an approximate life of the liner? Is it forever, or the liner itself? I'm thinking of the plastic parts. Does that break down eventually, or is the liner forever?
Fantastic question. So thank you. So really quickly, a bit of theory. So the theory behind the design and the design life of the liner systems comes from how long would the waste have the ability to impact the environment? And I use a quick analogy of coffee. We pour water over coffee grinds, we get a good cup of coffee. We pour 100 glasses of water over those same grinds. Water goes in and water comes out the bottom. Everything that's leached out of those coffee beans has leached out over time. The current thinking is that can take as long as 300 years or more in a modern landfill. And so we have to design liner systems that can last longer than that. So there are operational design lives for the plastic membranes, as you note, and they're on the order of 200 or 300 years each sequentially. But the clay, which is a natural material, has an infinite service life. So there are elements that have 200 to 300 year service lives, but the clay is a forever service life, meaning that it will not degrade or not permit any movement of water through it over time.
Okay, now I'm sorry, I'm assuming that you have, for this new site, there will be the same kind of liner system, because the 20 Mile Creek is very near. And so I would be concerned with that. The other thing I had, once a landfill, I understand the collection of the leachate, once the landfill site is closed, do you continue to collect the leachate through those pipes?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. So once the landfill is closed, the amount of precipitation is reduced, or that infiltrates into the waste once it's capped, so that volume of liquid goes down. But absolutely, there's a requirement to continue to remove any liquid from the landfill for decades after closure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
It's just that you don't want it just to escape and, maybe ruin someone's backyard or something.
Yeah, and I would just note that in addition to all of that engineering, there's a lot of monitoring that occurs around our campus, and we've been operating landfills at that campus for over 30 years now, and there's no indication that any of the liner systems. So a lot of monitoring and a lot of reporting of that data to ensure everything is operating as designed and there are no impacts to water courses or the environment.
So there's a lot of different ways of monitoring and making sure nothing escapes.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Linda. We're going to go to Councillor O'Hare. Has his hand up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you once again, back to Darren. Darren, just a little point was raised earlier, and I just want to touch on it a bit more, and that is the odors that come from the Walker facility. I live in the downtown area, and on some days the odors are quite strong. And I'm wondering, with the new phase 2, will that increase the odors tremendously? Are you looking at new technologies to control it better? If you can just give me some thoughts, because sometimes it is quite rank.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true.
Thank you, Councillor. And yes, we're aware, and we work closely with the community to receive feedback and complaints so that we can operate and react quickly to address any concerns. To your question around will things change, I think the answer is no, and will things improve? I think the answer is yes. So phase 2 is moving further to the east, so further away from Thorold, obviously closer to other community members. And we're not receiving different types of waste or more, so we shouldn't expect an increase by any means. But back to some of the conversations we were having around methane emissions, the same applies to odor emissions. So as new technology becomes available and comes online, that technology to reduce methane emissions will equivalently or equally reduce any odor potential in the community. So we're excited about the new technology like drones and satellite imagery and some of the research we're doing around the use of organic material to create what are effectively biofilters that consume any methane but consume odor that may come from certain areas. So you can imagine a drone might say, hey, there's a little bit of odor coming from this part of the site, and one of the techniques we could use would be to put more clay cap on that area, or to put some of these biofilters in that area to further reduce emissions. So our objective is to reduce odor all the time, continuous improvement.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go with Councillor Longo has his hand up.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Darren, thanks for coming in. Great presentation. Just want to go to phase 1. When that is eventually decommissioned in around 6 years, you mentioned there's multiple options it could be used for, but what's the plan? Do you go to the region first? Do you go to the local municipality, or do you go to private industry to see the best use for it?
Thank you. I think we would go to everyone. We would consultation is very broad, so we would speak to neighbors, we would speak to the local municipalities, we would speak to the broader community around interest to see. There will be constraints. There will be some things that we wouldn't be able to do, but but we'll seek that input to come to a decision that works best for the community. So
Great.
it will be broad consultation. It will not be focused or targeted.
Okay, thanks for that. Now let's go to phase two. That is located in the city of Niagara Falls, is it not?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. So can I ask, do you need anything from the city of Thorold? Do you need any approval here, or is this just to provide information to us?
I don't believe there are any explicit or statutory approvals per se. We're dealing with the municipality of Niagara Falls from an official plan or bylaw and land use perspective. But it's important to note that an environmental assessment starts very broad and looks at a proposal. So I'll use maybe economic impacts where there will be positive economic impacts from the project. There will be the continuation of jobs and opportunities, and of course maybe products, renewable energy that may have that there may be interest within the city of Thorold. So something like, so the EA will look very broadly. So feedback from the city as well as constituents and community members is very important. So we've been working closely with staff and will continue to do so. So it's our consultation and engagement program is very broad, but I do not believe there are any specific approvals required from council, from the city.
Okay, thanks
at this
for
point
that.
in time. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to I want to fast forward, let's say 25 years ahead. And I don't want to get into the politics of it, but your company's proposing another quarry in the Niagara Falls area. Would the logical extension of that quarry 25 years from now to be another landfill, assuming that technology doesn't change much?
Thank you. That's a great question, and the answer to that is it's not a logical conclusion. There is the potential. There's always the potential, but maybe I'll note there's a few really important differences from the proposed Uppers Quarry project and the campus located further to the north, where our current landfills are, that are technical. They're geological conditions where groundwater flows in towards our campus and in towards under the landfill where we monitor and collect it, that don't exist at the Uppers location. So there's a number of considerations or benefits that are afforded to us at our current location that don't exist, that make the potential for a landfill greatly reduced out there in the far future. And that number is probably closer to 60 years away from us today.
Okay,
given
great.
the
Thanks for that
operational
answer. I
life.
appreciate it. And again, I appreciate you coming in today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Linda, you have your hand up again.
Sorry, I'm full of questions here. Through you, Chair, to Councillor O'Hare, I'd like to thank him for bringing up the odor issue, because we don't live too far apart, a couple of blocks, and we have that odor issue as well. Once closed, do you continue, once a landfill is closed, does it continue to produce methane, and do you continue to collect it?
Thank you. In fact, it does. Landfills of this size will continue to produce methane for quite some time, over 20 years. And we have the ability and project the opportunity to collect that renewable resource, that landfill gas, for 20 years or more. So there's a requirement to collect it, much like requirement to collect leachate. And the benefit is that there will be a long-term supply of renewable energy for the community for that period as well.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
Okay, thank you. Is there any more questions for Darren? Seeing none, I'd like to thank you very much, Darren. That was a lot of information you provided. There were some great questions from all the committee members, and I wish you all the best in success with this project going forward. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation. And again, I'll just reiterate, feel free to connect with me directly. I'm happy to continue the conversation. Of course, lots to discuss at any point. It's an open door policy.
Sure. I'd just like to say something that this might be a bit of trivia for you, but the house that I live in, the Calcutt Walker House at the corner of Carleton and Portland, was one of the first Walkers that lived in it was David Walker.
Oh, wow.
Father to Donald. So there was 2 generations of Walkers in our house. They were in the house till about 1953. Donald was brother to John and Norris, and unfortunately he passed away in a boating accident, I think 1960 or so. But there is a connection to the Walker family in this house, and they have they've done wonderful things within the community with the various projects they've been involved with. Just for reference. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Darren.
Okay, we're going to go on to 5.2, proposed Lake Gibson Area Provincial Park. I'm now going to call on Fred Neal, who will present regarding a proposed Lake Gibson Area National Historical Provincial Park. Fred, are you there?
He just popped on, Joe, so you might want to repeat.
Yep. Are you ready for your presentation, Fred?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This proposal has been going on for quite a while, as you know, from what the information that has been given to you, 2001 to be exact.
Fred, do you want to do your video also?
Oh.
Yes, Fred, we need to see your beautiful face.
Yeah.
There we are. There we go.
There we go.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Good morning again. And my name is Fred Neal, former city councilor, the original chair of the Lake Gibson Corridor Committee back in 2001, which is a fair while ago. And it went along very significantly back in those days. We did a lot of work in putting things together for the conservation area. And unfortunately, when Adele Arbor retired, things went to the back burner because it was on the advice of the planning department, which it still is, that unless they call a meeting or unless they have something to do, our committee basically doesn't exist. And that, so fortunately, we met with the clerk and he advised us to continue on and to do our work. And that's why the committee has decided to come both to the environmental committee and maybe to the Parks and Rec committee at a later date to make a presentation on revising or revamping the area that we're talking about. And I'll just read through, and I know you have a copy of this, but I'm going to read through for the minutes and for the people that may be watching out there. The Lake Gibson Task Force was established by the city from report of May 30th, 2001 to develop the Lake Gibson corridor into a natural heritage cultural area landmark in the city of Thorold that can be enjoyed by generations of Canadians. The area would connect Allenburg, Welland Canal areas in the east with Morning Star Mill and DeQ Road at the west end of the conservation area. The committee has been successful in having the province include the area as part of the Greenbelt. The committee has had the city put $150,000 in the budget to map the area, documenting all aspects of the park, trails, natural areas, historical features, perimeters of the park. Because of the planners changing, there's been a revolving door as far as the planning department has been concerned, so we have not had a continuous effort to keep it going. Exploring the number of options of preserving the lands within the DQ Park corridor, purchasing additional lands and arranging leases. It had started and the city had purchased about 2 or 3 different properties within the scope of the area to advocate a new environmental ethic that instills a new relationship between nature and the community, enhance and protect existing fish, wildlife, and vegetation habitats using environmentally sound design techniques. The heritage, historic, and cultural aspects of the corridor cannot be overemphasized. A number of walking, bicycle trails traverse the area, including the Merritt Trail, the Bruce Trail, the Niagara Regional Walkway, Indigenous trails of DeQ and Beaver Dams roadways. The area includes all 4 Welland canals, historic railway line, the Beaver Dams Community DeQ House and Park, the first hydroelectric power station in Ontario before Niagara Falls, Beaver Dams Church, the village of Beaver Dams, the Swayze Walker Farm, and we were talking about the walkers earlier, and that's where some of the walkers lived, Melsford Park, and Indigenous Healing Garden, Morningstar Mill, and the Lower Seacoast site and DeQ Park. A number of historical farms border the park, including the Youngbloods, Smiths, and Gordons. Thorold's drinking water traverses the Welland Canal at the Allenburg Bridge to the western end of the park by a separate channel to the Niagara Region's water plant. The Indigenous history of the area is one that needs to be promoted and recorded. The recommendations from the Lake Gibson Corridor Task Force Group: number 1, to create an Ontario Natural Environmental Heritage Cultural Park, to map the area, documenting all aspects of the park, the trails, the natural area, historic features, the perimeters of the park, and to document the environmental aspects of the park. I've added that onto the bottom. And to make a presentation to City Council to ask the province to create a provincial park. Just an aside, this whole area is very historic. And without the things that happened in this area, including the War of 1812 and the Battle of Beaver Dams by our Indigenous partners, Canada would not be here. We'd be part of the American situation that's going on right now. So this area is very historic, very environmental, very natural, and it needs to be put into a park situation. This is the reason why I'm bringing it here today as the first step in maybe a long step for bringing this forward to council and then to the province. You have a map, I presume, in front of you that covers the area in question. And there's a lot of history from one end, from the Allenburg end, all the way through to the Parkway, the DeQ Parkway end. And so that's why I'm here today on behalf of the committee, behalf of re-energizing, and on behalf of putting that $150,000, and it may cost more to do an RFP and to do the park. But this is why we are here today, is to bring it forward so it can be discussed and brought forward to City Council. And hopefully the 2 councillors that are here, at least we bring it forward to be discussed at council itself and to see if it can be put into a conservation area park.
Okay, thank you, Fred. That's quite a comprehensive package you've provided us. I mean, I've sat down with you over the past couple of months and we've gone over a lot of the history of it. And just to let the committee know that there was a call for volunteers late last summer, early fall, for some of the committees that had vacancies. And I applied for the Lake Gibson Corridor Task Force. I felt there was an overlapping of mandates that, between the Environment Committee and the Lake Gibson Corridor, we shared certain interests. So I applied for the committee and I was accepted. And unfortunately, that was about the time that the city decided to revamp and reorganize some of the committees and downgraded, as Fred said, the Lake Gibson Corridor group to a community liaison group, which really doesn't function as a committee anymore. We just sit and wait for staff to reach out to us if they need any information. So like Fred said, we've met with staff, city reps 2 times now, and we have held a meeting amongst ourselves as the working group. And it was my suggestion that we kind of merge to some degree. We do have a member of the Lake Gibson Corridor Group has now taken a position on our committee here, and that's Joe Atkinson. We'll get him to introduce a little later on. But I just thought that this would be a good opportunity because of the natural habitat that exists out there, and that is part of our agenda, that perhaps there's something that we can do to keep the Lake Gibson Corridor goals in the public's eye, to let them know that we don't want this to fall by the wayside. And it's a very important area. As Fred said, when you read all these reports, there's history out there. There's the Indigenous history that Sarah King Head reported in the book that she did on where the beavers built their dams. Native people have been in that area over 1,000 years. They would vacation. They would come down into this area from the Grand River area, and there's evidence of long houses that existed out there. And then, you just go through the different centuries of what evolved over there. The original Thorold started out there. There's so much history. It would be a shame to let this fall by the wayside. So I'd like to see what comments anybody has for Fred, what we can do to help this committee. He's done a good presentation. There's a lot of information that we can read, and hopefully we can do something for the committee. Is there any comments or questions for Fred? Joe.
Thank you. Good presentation, Fred. Very good presentation. I've been on the Lake Gibson committee in one form or another, I think, since Fred was since it was originally organized. Anybody who's not walked through there really should take a stroll. There are lots of places. This time of year, there's a few places that are a little bit mucky, but I would encourage anyone who hasn't, just wander through a little bit. It's amazing. We were out there the other day, and I think I saw a couple of weasels, for example. There's evidence of all kinds of other animals. And if you just look around, the biodiversity is quite amazing. On another note, I understand that there's a little bit of confusion about the RFP, or whether or not it's going ahead. Something about staff decided not to apply for a grant. I don't know whether that is included in the $150,000 or if it's another grant. This may or may not be the time to ask staff to comment on that, possibly at a roundtable, just to give them a few minutes to check if they're not in a position to talk to it right now. But apart from that, Fred, it's a very good presentation. And as I say, I encourage anyone who hasn't, just even if you just walk around the edges, drive around the edges, it's quite interesting. Back to the mapping. Part of the reason for the mapping is that there are, even from an environmental point of view, we don't really know, walking through, who owns what. Bell has a piece of property in there. OPG, there's a cogeneration plant, electricity plant. The city owns some. There's a lot of private, and of course a big chunk of seaway. So that as we proceed, that is one of the reasons that I feel that the mapping needs to be done, just so we know who we have to talk to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Yeah, it's like Joe says, we did go out there one day last week, and it's a nice area to walk through. We didn't cover that much. Fred took us to a couple of highlighting spots, just the areas that are of significance. But when you get out there, it's nice. It's quiet. Right now it's a little quiet. The wildlife, the birds and that are just starting to come around. But I can imagine what it would be like in the summertime. But it does need the mapping from an environmental inventory type, species, whether it's wildlife, aquatic life, plant life, tree life. There could be some at-risk species out there. There wasn't any that were identified during the environmental assessment for the off-leash dog park, but there are species out there that do deserve protection. I'm going to go with Linda. Did you have your hand up first, or was it Mark?
Mark's
Okay,
first.
Okay. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. So again, thank you, Fred, for the information. Joe, I'm just looking at it from an organizational perspective. I mean, the sounds of having a park, a provincial park, or whatever designation we can get sounds really good. What I want to understand, because I don't have the history that you guys do, is what are the steps necessary to obtain such a designation, and where are we in that process? If that could be documented and shared with the committee, I think that's would be my first ask, because I don't quite understand where we are, but it sounds like it's a really good idea.
Okay, I'll go to Fred for that, because Fred, they were so close a few years ago to attaining that goal, and I'll let Fred take over for answering that question.
Yeah, maybe to answer it from my perspective is that the planning department dictates what happens with this process. And it was going along great. And matter of fact, there's been two major meetings a few years ago now. And Kerry Royer will see about this, is that Joe Hurst, area supervisor of MNR, Mike Rose, Land Care Niagara, Darcy Baker, Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, Adele Arbor, City of Thorold, Ian Seddon, Planning Services, Ken Forgeron, RM of Niagara, the Regional Municipality of Niagara, Peter Sturdy, Ontario Parks, MNR, Brian Hughes, Ontario Parks, MNR, and Neil Hester, MNR, Niagara Escarpment. So there was a meeting with all those because the city asked for one to get clarification and to move forward on this. So a meeting was held, and there's minutes that I have, and that the city of Thorold doesn't seem to have a lot of the information that has been submitted over the years through the planning department. For whatever reason, some of this information has been lost to wherever. And we have also, because of that particular meeting, another meeting was with the Ontario Power Generation, with two people from the power generation. And they all said it sounds very, very good. But then Adele Arbor retired. Other planning people came on board. And of course, planning gets involved in other things other than this specific adventure. And so on and off all the rest of the years, it's been a hit and miss. I'm presenting this on behalf of about 40 or 50 people, including two former mayors who actually sat on the committee and tried to propel it forward. And we did get the designation as far as the planning is concerned. We can only go so far as the committee is concerned. Then the people that need to take over and carry it forward, which council is one of them, and actually way back in the day, council did approve us carrying forward. But now we have to do it again. It's gone by the wayside. The steps to take is to map the area, so at least we have the area that we want to look at, and maybe it's time to send it to the province. I don't know, but I think those are the next steps that have to be done. Is we've got as far as we can, as far as the committee is concerned. We have the history of the area. We have a lot of the environmental issues of the area. And now it's to present to the province. That's my thing that I think should happen through a process through the city. But that's why we're here today, is to put that process forward into the city council's lap, I'll call it, and the planning department's section, and to see where we can go from here.
Okay, thank you, Fred. I see a lot of hands popped up. There's several over on the sidebar, and I'm sorry I didn't see what order they came up in. I was watching the people that have their audio or video on. I'll go to Linda, and then I'll go down to Carrie and Matthew. They both have their hands up. So go ahead, Linda.
Okay, this is a work in progress, and I might be premature in this what I have here, but I've written a motion, move that the Environmental Biodiversity Climate Change Advisory Committee supports the goal of creating a Lake Gibson Conservation National Historic Provincial Park.
Okay, we'll give that some consideration. Let me go over to Carrie. Fred did reference Carrie in his presentation. So Carrie, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Thanks, Fred, for the presentation. I know I've chatted about this for some time now. I'm curious if, like Darcy Baker obviously is not with the NPCA anymore and hasn't been for a few years now. I'm curious if at the time there was any interest from the NPCA to be the property holder as opposed to the province, just out of curiosity. I'm not a land planning person, but I was just curious how that conversation went at the time, and if that would still be of consideration by the committee, or if your preference is for it to be provincially designated.
To answer that question, that was discussed with the NPCA at the time, and we had some good discussions about it, but again, it sort of stopped, whether to go provincially, whether to go through NPCA, or even federal. But that's what we should be talking about now is do we want to go to the province, and council has to make that decision? Do we want to go with the NPCA, and can the NPCA take on this type of project? I'm not sure whether the historical aspects of it, whether they might be interested in doing that, but that's for discussion of another time, Carrie, and I think council probably will want to talk to the NPCA if they do decide to go ahead and look at this.
Okay.
Yeah, that was how I was going to leave it. Sorry, Chair, if I can just answer that. If the options can be left open, if there could be a renewed discussion with the NPCA with respect to that conversation. We do have other properties that have historical significance as well as ecological significance, like Balls Falls and St. John's. There's lots of examples of that. So I think, and the fact that this property in particular is accessible by public transportation would be, I think, something that may be of interest as well, because we do have a new strategic plan, and one of those strategic priorities is creating equitable access to green space, and having accessible green space by public transportation is something we don't have a lot of right now. So just if that could be left open, like I said, I don't even know what the interest would be on our end, because I'm not in that department, but I'm happy to have that conversation if we get there.
Okay, thanks, Carrie. That was great. Some good comments there. I'm going to go with Matthew has his hand up.
Thanks, Chair. Just some general comments here. I think overall, to Mr. Neal's point, some information may have been lost in transition of staff and process over recent years. And I think there's just still some questions that need to be answered around what is the role that the municipality would play in this, and does council have an interest in pushing this forward as a priority? Because in doing so, presuming the municipality has a role, there's obviously staff time and resources that would be put into putting this forward. So at some point it is a council decision, but I think there might be some more information we need to gather ahead of time. Is there a role for the NPCA in this? And I think the freedom of the the committee itself, being a community liaison group, kind of has that ability to currently liaise and gather information with other organizations to present that, bigger picture back here to this committee, perhaps for this committee to make the recommendation back to council on a direction that we might want to go forward. But just sort of speaking to that, I think there is some more information that might be missing, and not to necessarily speak for planning, but at currently, planning doesn't have any specific direction beyond having some funds set aside that were for mapping. And I think there's even some questions on what is to be mapped and how that mapping should go forward. So there is some direction that's perhaps missing, some decisions that will eventually need to be made, but this is an excellent step on getting back on that track and determining, what that priority is for council and where to go forward with it. I'm still in favor of the group continuing as a community liaison group, of course, giving that freedom to work with groups like the NPCA and perhaps being a conduit for this cause and this idea to bring information back towards the committee and to the city staff.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Are you okay with that, Fred? I mean, that gives us an opportunity to gather some information and keep meeting and going forward.
Yeah, I agree, because in discussing with Matthew at a meeting recently, his comments regarding our particular role of our committee does give us a latitude of going out and talking to other organizations and then getting some information back. But my only comment is that to me, council has to make a decision whether they want to allow us to go forward with this. I mean, this is a big thing. One of my over the years, I have been across Canada and across the United States, and I've visited hundreds of different places and parks and monuments and things of that nature. And as far as I'm concerned, this is one of the most wonderful area for history and for the environment and for teaching people what Canada is all about. And of course, nature. I mean, we have trails in there. You'd be surprised. And when I took the committee, and they were very surprised at what's in that whole area, and that, so it's something that we need to move forward on. I don't know, maybe it's the way Matthew has stated, but I think we need to move forward on this, but it's up to this particular committee to how do we move forward, because our committee is just going to just sit there from now on discussing a few things, but basically we're at that standstill, I'll call it, on which direction to go.
Well, I mean, I agree with what Matthew was saying. We need to kind of fill in, like, there's a couple of blank spaces here. We should reach out to the NPCA and see where they stand, the other different organizations. Perhaps we should get updated viewpoints, because some of the information is older. Viewpoints may have changed. We may be dealing with different people in different positions. So it almost sounds like, you've got to kind of start over and rebuild the players that were involved in the beginning, and see if everybody's still on board before we go back to council and say, can we get your support? That's my comment, my opinion. I see Joe had his hand up. Did you want to say something, Joe?
Yeah, if I may, and I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but this is what this is part of what the mapping is about. Because right now, in any particular place, we don't know well, in a lot of places, we don't know who the players are. So if, just as an example, we could get OPG to say, okay, we're happy with you designating these parcels of land, and then find out that somebody else owns this chunk right in the middle. We don't know.
Okay.
That's my point.
Okay. Linda, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I just from the discussion, I just changed my motion a little bit. I move that the Environmental Biodiversity Climate Change Advisory Committee supports the goal to move forward with the process towards creating a Lake Gibson Conservation National Historic Provincial Park. So that would mean the process would include the mapping and so on, but it's something that I think we need to, I think this committee has worked long and hard and continues to work long and hard on it. But I think maybe they need some additional support, and council, as Fred says, needs to make a decision on this, perhaps. And the city needs to think about what they want to do. Now, this motion doesn't say it's going to be imminent or anything like that. It's just that to move forward with the process so that we can so that would mean, Joe, doing some of the things that you've already listed that still need to be done or updated, but it's all part of the process. But and that's my argument.
Sure. Okay. Point taken. Councillor O'Hare.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make a couple of points, if I may. Fred, thanks for coming in and providing me with so much valuable information. I'm a big supporter of green spaces and parks. You can never have too many, in my opinion. And I love this area. Both myself and my wife hike it regularly, and it is really a treasure to have this in Thorold. I think that, and I'm going to touch a little bit on Mark's point as well, is trying to define where we are at this point, because for myself, this is something new. So it's important to get all the information. I've heard a figure of 150,000 to map it out. I think we need to know more in terms of cost beyond that. That's just a simple first stage. What will it actually cost the city to attain this provincial park status, which I would love, or whether it's NPCA that's governing the area as well, that'd be wonderful too. So what other expenses are there after the mapping has been taken care of? And I guess also really important is time frame. Are we talking something that's going to take another 5, another 10? I'm not sure once we're dealing with the provincial offices if these things are very slow going, or if it's something that's turned around quickly. And I guess the last thing, and Joe touched on this as well, who the properties belong to. There may be private properties in there that may hinder and obstruct. There's also some St. Catharines land that kind of is woven into this as well. So there needs to be a lot of information that has to come back before we can make sound decisions on this. But I do, in principle, certainly support more green space and parkland in Thorold.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Linda, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there are provincial grants to help the city with all these expenses. It's a green space, and we're looking at properties in 2 different communities. So I was just wondering if there are grants that can be applied for to actually help the city with the expenses of the city, because this area, it will eventually be perhaps a provincial or national area. And maybe even nationally, you could actually investigate whether there are grants that could be achieved for creating this green space as a national or provincial park.
Okay.
I don't know.
Joe, you've got your hand up.
That's I I agree with you, but I think it's a little bit premature for that. That's the main reason for our, again, going back to it, main reason for our mapping, so that we can see who we have to talk to. And if we are told by certain organizations, landowners, people who have, or organizations that have interests, that we may as well not even discuss putting their piece of property into a park, then we want to know that up front. Also, I've done a tiny bit of research on what we might have to do to get a provincial or federal park going there. But basically, first level of bureaucrats is going to say, okay, where do you want to put it? Drop it, what are the lines? Show me where you want it. Until you've got that, you're not going to get any further than the first level bureaucrat.
So Joe, what you're really saying is we need the mapping, and the first $150,000 for the mapping would come from the city?
Yeah. The mapping is not necessarily going to cost $150,000. Okay. What we're talking about is like literally mapping it out. You can, what we need is, my thought, and I don't know what the rules are on this type of thing, was a fresh flyby of drones. Now I know you got the seaway right there, so you may not be able to fly drones that close to the seaway. I would like to see a proper current map. You can go on Google Maps right now and have a real good look at it. It's none of it's snow covered, but I have no idea how old those particular Google Maps are. Also, we would like to know zoning. Who owns it? Going back, as I say, going back to who owns it. And from that point of view, again, this goes to planning, that it would be nice, and it was approved at one stage before the whole structure was changed, that our committee would be notified if applications were made for changes in zoning or for building permits on any particular piece of property.
Within that corridor?
Yeah, in that general corridor. But having said, we're back to, okay, what's the corridor? Okay, are we on both sides of beaver dams? Little things like, is the frog pond part of our purview? We don't know. That's why we need to determine. We need to draw some lines.
Okay. So you're saying map it out and then reach out to the parties that fall within certain areas to see if they're going to be on board.
Yeah, at this stage, I don't really see I personally don't see asking the city for any more money than they've already budgeted, notwithstanding that tiny bit of confusion that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah. So then are we then looking at, from our perspective, the Environment Committee, we're asking council to approve the mapping of this. Now Matthew's got his hand up.
Sorry, not to interrupt you, Mr. Chair. So a motion was already approved to sort of hand this over to planning in terms of the mapping, what we'll quote unquote. And listening today a little bit more, and I think planning would be in agreement with this. The first thing that we need to understand is, what is that boundary of what this would look like? And then once we understand the boundary, what is the ownership and what is the makeup of the properties within that boundary, and how is that impacted? That's already been approved by council at that high level. So that direction is already with planning to be able to do that. I don't think that in itself is the issue. I understand Linda's motion, I believe, to support this effort from the committee. I think that's reasonable at this time. And then once, planning learns a little bit more about what that looks like and being able to bring back more information, you could then look at what next steps are. Maybe this is, not as complex as it seems to be. Maybe it's much more complex than it seems to be. Again, I don't know enough about it to speak that, and I see that Connor's hand is up, so I'll leave him to address anything he's going to, but that's my understanding of where we would be at with this. So absolutely reasonable for the committee to kind of support the effort and it going forward. I don't know if anything is needed beyond that at this time.
Okay, thank you. Connor, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks through you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to note if there was an interest in a map just of the current zoning, official plan designation, that kind of things, we could easily provide that to the committee if that'd be helpful. The city has online an interactive mapping tool that anyone can go ahead and use, but if there's a desire for, you know, a set out map, if you pass us over the boundaries, I can easily pull that offline and distribute it to the committee as well.
Okay, that'd be good.
And I
Thank
think
you.
just another item, I think when we had originally talked about the mapping, there was, I guess the what we thought, planning thought maybe the committee was asking for was more of like a sub watershed mapping. So the limits of I guess any of the water courses that were flowing into the Lake Gibson area. So that was thought to be quite a large, I guess, undertaking. What I'm hearing is maybe that's not exactly what the request would be. So any additional details, as Matthew noted, would be very helpful for us in scoping exactly what we need to get this going.
Okay, Fred, you okay with that?
Yes, I am, and that's what we're looking for, the boundaries right at the present moment, and then we could take a look at who owns the property within the boundaries and go from there, which we have done in the past, but it's been a long time. And when we, just as an aside, when in the Greenbelt, we got the Greenbelt legislation put in for it being in the Greenbelt, we had to go through the region, and actually Councillor Hanley and I met at the OPG regarding it, and somewhere, maybe at the region, because it had to go through the region in order for that to happen. So there might even be some mapping, but planning doesn't seem to know where a lot of this information is, but I think the information as far as the mapping is concerned might be as easy as looking to the region and asking them if they have copies of their proposal to the provincial government regarding the Greenbelt information.
Okay. So then Matthew's basically suggesting that we support your initiative through the motion that Linda's amended motion that she put forward. Do you want to read that again, Linda?
Okay, move that the Environmental Biodiversity Climate Change Advisory Committee supports the goal to move forward with the process towards creating a Lake Gibson Conservation National Historic Provincial Park. Or we could just say National Historic Park, and then it could be national or provincial. I could say, or go toward a Lake Gibson Conservation National Historical Provincial or National Park. How's that if we add the national in there?
If maybe you can add in the NPCA into that equation. I don't know whether that would disturb the motion or not. But so that through Carrie, that maybe some discussions with the NPCA could be advanced also.
Well,
Okay.
I think the motion's just supporting you going forward. Any partnerships that could be, I think, created moving forward, it's just getting support from the group itself, but at least you would have council's support of this being established as a park area. Am I missing something here?
No, I don't mind that the way it is. I'm just,
Yeah.
I think it would be up to the city which way they choose to go, wouldn't it?
Okay, Mark, you've got a comment?
Yeah, I was just gonna say simplify, take out provincial or federal, and then it leaves it open for NPCA, it leaves it open for provincial, just.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
Okay, it's just a historical park. Like a conservation, a Lake Gibson Conservation National, well, you had national in there, historical park. There was national, I had national in there before, a conservation national historical park. So a conservation historical park, is that what you
Yeah.
want?
Yeah, I don't think we need the national.
no,
Or the provincial. So move
Right.
that the Environmental Biodiversity Climate Change Advisory Committee supports the goal to move forward with the process towards creating a Lake Gibson Conservation Historical Park. How's that?
do we need to mention the Lake Gibson Corridor Community Liaison Group? Because that's what we're supporting, their efforts. This isn't our initiative.
The
It's the Lake Gibson Corridor Community Liaison Group. Am I correct, Fred?
Lake,
It is, but your group is, your particular committee has to approve it, so moving forward to city council.
Okay,
the Lake Gibson Corridor Conservation Committee? Or, okay, so,
I would leave it the way you had it, Linda,
okay,
okay,
the way
Okay.
Mark wanted it read.
okay. So move that the Environmental Biodiversity Climate Change Advisory Committee supports the goal to move forward with the process towards creating a Lake Gibson Conservation Historical Park.
okay. You okay with that?
Yep,
So we need a seconder.
Okay, we got a mover and a seconder. Moved by Linda, seconded by Joe Atkinson. Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Okay, that's carried.
thank you.
Okay, thank you, Fred. And look forward to sitting down with you again in the next while and see how we can move this forward. Thanks. Okay, let's move on. We got correspondence here. Item 6.1, new committee members. At its meeting on March 19th, 2024, Council selected Helen Hermanson and Joe Atkinson to join the committee and expanded the committee's terms of reference to add an additional member. I'd like to welcome the new members. And Helen, if you'd like to do a bit of an introduction to yourself so we get to know who you are.
Okay, now I feel like I'm allowed to speak. So my name is Helen Hermanson. I live in Thorold. Sounds like I live in the same neighborhood as the rest of you, so we'll see each other, or you'll recognize me when you see me. My background originally is my education is forestry, so I have a Bachelor of Science in Forestry from the University of Toronto. And then my work experience has mostly been Ministry of Natural Resources, so as a technical specialist, a technician, and a forester over the years.
Yep.
So a lot of what I had more recently done there is species at risk, wetland evaluations, wildlife surveys, that type of thing, and also some compliance and forestry work. More recently, I'm helping a group called Landcare Niagara. So they do some tree planting and some pollinator gardens and also some research species at risk, invasive species type things. So I support them with their forestry work at the moment and maybe some of their invasive species work and also actually their pollinator gardens. I also volunteer with the Bruce Trail Club. So I'm a hike leader there where I lead their nature hike. So I'm on their biodiversity committee as well. So working on projects to do some habitat restoration, removing invasive species and planting native species on some of the properties that they own. And let's see. Oh yeah, so what got me interested in the committee, I have a big interest in trees and urban forestry, and you know, you can see the canopy of the city changing as disease comes through and old trees are removed. So that's gotten me initially interested in being able to provide, advice or information that could maybe help improve the urban forest and maybe not cost a lot or not cost anything or even save money. And then I'm just a big advocate for sustainable, livable cities. So I'm also interested in transportation in the city, its environmental impacts, its effect on livability, that sort of thing. So that was sort of the big picture. There's a lot of invasive species also, even in your Lake Gibson proposed conservation area. So habitat restoration is a big thing to me, along with this sort of urban parks and urban green space. So that's a nutshell of what my interests and background are.
That's a big nut.
And I don't know if anyone has any questions or wants to know more of my background or interests, or if they have similar interests or anything, please feel free to reach out or ask me right now.
Oh, welcome. No, you're going to be a valuable asset. Thank you very much. Let's go to Joe and let him give it a brief bio.
There we go. Let's see. Well, part of the reason that I applied for this committee was on particularly since the types committee or the designation of various committees changed. It occurred to me that there's a lot of overlap that nobody seems to, or well, that does not seem to get taken into account too much. Lake Gibson is obviously in the purview of the environmental committee. It's certainly in the purview of the Parks and Rec, which I'm also on. There are, depending how you count, there's 3, 4, possibly 5 city parks within that area. The reason I say that is because the dog park hasn't been officially designated yet, and there's some question as to whether the frog pond is supposed to be part of it. Going back a little bit, I've been a member of various committees going back to when I was on city council. And as a matter of fact, for a brief period, I was acting mayor and acting regional councilor for about 6 months back in the late 90s. I've been on various committees pretty much continuously ever since. Lake Gibson, of course. I was on the historical committee for quite some time. Thorough nonprofit housing. I've lived in this area for something over 30 years. All 3 of my kids have grown up and gotten married in town here. Although my one treacherous son has moved to Welland, but my older daughters threatened to move to Welland at one point, except then she realized that she can't be a thorough volunteer firefighter anymore if she moves out of town. So she's good here, at least until after she gets married next weekend. Even going back a little bit further, we've got a family, we call it a farm, although pretty much all we raise are prize mosquitoes up just north of Barrie. And a number of years ago, we decided to get part of it declared as a, now just sitting here, okay, I can't remember whether it's Simcoe County or the actual province. We've got it designated as a wetland just so that it can't be developed. We saw that Barrie was, well, it might take another 30 years, but we're going to have houses on our border at some point up there. But anyway, and I will cease rambling now unless there are any questions. Thank you.
I was going to do the little tug on the ear, that's the signal. Okay, thank you, Joe. And Helen, great. Let's move on. We got a couple pieces of correspondence just for information. PWCS 28-2024, the 2024 Earth Day event revised. At its meeting on March 19, 2024, Council passed the resolutions regarding the 2024 Earth Day event. Basically, this was just a discussion on providing some seed money for the event. There was $5,000 set in a budget for the Earth Day cleanup committee group. So they've kind of split it in half and given the Earth Day event some money that went towards the trees are going to be donated, you know, some advertising, a bit of staff time, etc. So later on in the meeting, there'll be an update that Jacob's going to provide for the committee on the Earth Day event. So moving on to the next piece of information here, council resolution regarding the Partners for Climate Protection Program. At its meeting on March 19th, 2024, council passed the following resolution regarding the Partners for Climate Protection Program. That staff be directed to consult with the regional municipality of Niagara with respect to available resources to meet any legislative requirements pertaining to climate change, and that staff be directed to request the Partners for Climate Protection Program appear before council to make a presentation within 3 months of today's date. Maybe some questions from some of the people on this. This originally stemmed from a motion that Councillor Handley put forward. It was a reconsideration vote. So this was discussed at the March 19th meeting. It was a very lengthy discussion, back and forth. Basically came down to questions that weren't able to be answered related to cost that would be associated with staff time. So hence the council is going to be presented with what all is involved with the PCP program, and there'll be prepared questions. We'll be able to also submit. Mark's going to do an update to the committee on the PCP working group update, and he'll be able to provide a lot of information to us at that time. So we'll move on to, you've seen this document that was provided, CWCD 119-2024, Species at Risk Act, Sarah, protection of chimney swift and its habitat. If there is any questions on this, feel free. We can do a minor discussion on this for the moment. Is there anything coming from the committee? Okay, seeing none. Let's go to item 7, working group update. And we've got 7.1 Earth Day. Let's go to Jacob Tedesco, and he can give the committee an update on where we stand with this particular event. Jacob?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone, or maybe afternoon at this point almost. Yeah, so recently, as Joe had mentioned there, we did get approval for council for some budget money for this. So there's a few different things to update you on. Essentially, the budget money is in part going to be used by advertising, in part for some staff time to help run the event at the arena. Probably the most exciting part of the budget money that did get approved is we're going to be using some to purchase 100 trees to be giving away to residents of Thorold at the event, just to help drum up interest and promote the event. So basically that'll look like 100 3-foot trees in 1-gallon baskets, part supplied by Gold's Nurseries over on the other side of the canal there. Gold's will also be bringing some other smaller shrubs and different saplings to give away. But kind of exciting that we'll be able to give that away and use that as promotion to get the public involved and excited for this event. We're also still tying this event in with our cleanup. So this year focusing on a cleanup around kind of the grounds of the arena, moving up through Front Street and the downtown corridor towards Battle Beaver Dams Park. So that's kind of the main area that we're going to be focusing on for outdoor cleanup at this event. Through the event, we'll be supplying garbage bags, gloves to the public for anyone that wants to volunteer and get involved that way with helping to clean up the surrounding areas. Aside from that, we've also recently put out a call through vendors through our social media coordinator here, media communication specialist, Natalie. So she's put out a call for any other vendors that might be interested in participating at this event. Maybe Darren might be a good one with Walker that did a presentation earlier, just to provide more information to the public on, you know, what Walker's doing. I think that might tie in nicely. Helen, that's new to the committee, mentioned, I think you were part of the Bruce Trail Club. If you'd like to reach out, or if anyone else has any other people that they think would be appropriate to include as a vendor, looking to promote environmental awareness and education for Earth Day, please feel free to forward that to me at community.services@thorold.ca. trying to lock up our vendors fairly quickly here with our event coming up in the next couple weeks, but there's still some time to include some additional vendors. Aside from that, another aspect that's going to be part of the event is some children's activities that'll be, excuse me, being programmed through the Thorold Library and Thorold Camps or Thorold Community Activities Group, sorry. So they've put together a couple different activities. It sounds like there will be a little bit of an obstacle course for younger kids to kind of run around, tying in some different environmental, characters. Like I think they wanted to include some kind of tree branches or something like that, where kids could kind of zigzag between and kind of some local wildlife species, so they can tie in an education factor to that as well. But more something just for younger kids to get up and burn some energy off, so they're not just sitting there bored the whole time. Aside from that, there'll also be, sorry, they were looking to do an activity with Joe. Maybe Joe might want to speak on that a little bit further after, but I think maybe most of the committee already probably has an idea of what Joe had planned. And then they also want to incorporate a bit of a story time with kids. So between having some other speakers that might be doing presentations, the library would like to also do like a book reading with children as well too. Just so we have kind of 3 or so different activities for all ages. And then also recently I'm working with Thorold Auto Parts. So Frank Saravelli from Thorold Auto Parts would like to donate some small seeds to do kind of a planting activity with children as well that the library could put on. Aside from that, a couple different speakers that we wanted to have at the event. Still looking for possibly 1 or 2 more speakers to incorporate into the event, just to give a brief half-hour, maybe 45-minute at the most, talk about a topic related to Earth Day or providing some sort of environmental education for people that show up.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. It is, the event pretty well is, I'd say, heavy on education. Some of the vendors that we do have showing up, like Habitat for Humanity is going to be there with the table set up. They're going to have an e-waste bin in the parking lot. They're going to start promoting their own social media that the e-waste bin is going to be at this particular event, so that people get a heads up for bringing in any electronic waste that is ready for disposal. Habitat for Humanity, what they do is they dismantle microwaves or anything electronic devices. They separate the valuable materials from scrap material. They have a third-party vendor that comes in and buys it from them, so they gain revenue from that. We do have other education type vendors. I'm not too sure, Jacob, are you aware of 50 by 30 wanting to participate? I know Mark had reached out to me with that. If not, then maybe we'll reach out to him.
I can't think of the list because I've got a list for this, a list for Mark, and a list for a couple other things. If you wouldn't mind, just forward me that contact again if you haven't.
Yeah, we actually, Mark and I met with Herb last night, and he is very much in favor of attending this event. His reasoning was that he really hasn't had that much exposure in the Thorold area, so it's an opportunity for him to get people up to speed on what his organization does. Yeah, we've got the TCAG is going to be there. I've lost track of most of the vendors that we've got, but it should be a pretty good event. Heritage Thorold's going to have a table there. The Environment Committee is going to have a table set up. Mark's going to man that. What we're going to do for the Environment Committee basically is have some kind of a survey available for the people. Mark's going to be there to ask questions, talk about different aspects of environmental protection, biodiversity, whatever they want to talk about, and perhaps ask some of the people what they want to see the Environment Committee get involved in. So what Mark and I talked about last night is we've been working on our long-term objectives, and if we get a list of some nice suggestions at the Earth Day event, we might just want to reboot and reconsider what we want to put into our long-term objectives, depending on what people put forward to us. It would be nice to really pay attention to the people, to get their engagement, so that they'll keep coming back to us with possible suggestions. And we're going to work with the committee. I think we did suggest that for people that are going to attend the event, the people from Thorold that show up, they might perhaps want to do a non-perishable food donation for community care. They are a wonderful organization. So I think it's all about community involvement. Looking forward to this. It's a first time event. Okay, yes, thank you. I see Carrie's hand is up. Maybe I'll let her say something right now. Carrie, go ahead.
Sure, Joe, I just wondered if you could just repeat to me the hours of the event and the location where the vendors will be, or maybe Jacob can, the location where the vendors would have tables, because I think I am trying to secure like a staff person from the NPCA to be there if you'll have us. We usually at this kind of event would do like a little seed ball activity with kids where they can make a little seed ball with native seeds and bring it home.
That's cute. Yeah.
So yeah, I just wanted to be clear about the hours and the location, just so I can share that.
Okay, Jacob.
Sure, of course. Thank you, Gary. And we would be very excited to have you there. For the C-ball activity, we'd like to put probably your booth close to the center of the arena floor. So it's going to be at the City of Thorold Community Arena in the Doherty Arena. That's 70 Front Street North in Thorold. And then basically we have arena divided into kind of three main spaces. So towards the one side, a vendor area, towards the middle, an area for children's activities, and then down towards the far end, a spot for speakers. So considering that you would like to also kind of provide some children's activities, we would like to see probably your booth close to the middle, just so it could use some extra tables and space that would be set up there if kids needed another spot to kind of set up the activity. But yeah, it's 70 Front Street North in Thorold. And then the hours of it is Saturday, April 20th from 10 to 3. We'll be there 2 hours earlier for vendors to start setting up, and 2 hours after as kind of a tear down window to have some cleanup time as well.
Okay, thank you. So 10 to 3 is the event is on, and then there's some time before and after for setup. And one more question, is there tables there, or would we be bringing so it's indoor space, so we don't need a tent or anything, but a table, would we bring our own table, or is that something that the city will have there?
We'll have our own tables out for kind of the children's activity area that you'd be welcome to use as well. But for kind of your booth or table kind of area, if you could bring your own table, just
okay,
being limited.
Yep, that's good. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. And I'll probably see you on Sunday down in Alderman for the CD Saturday or CD Sunday.
Oh, yes, I'm heading there on Sunday. I'm hoping it's not too much traffic to get home on Sunday with the eclipse on Monday.
Yeah.
That's my worry.
Yeah,
But we'll see, hopefully. It's usually a good event.
Yeah, great. I'm looking forward to it. I missed out on it last year because I had a sciatic nerve problem, but I'm looking forward to it this year. Okay, yeah. Yeah, Jacob did mention that I'm participating as well in the Thorold birthday event. I'm doing 2 workshops with one's with the Thorold Library and the other's with the TCAG. So we've got 10 little kids, 8 to 12 years old in each of the 2 groups. I think I'm doing one show at 11 and one at 1, and they'll be assembling a little native bee nesting habitat that they'll be able to take home. So I'm looking forward to that because I did a trial run at the TCAG on March 23rd with the Niagara Geo Club. And it was a real hit with the little kids. They just loved it. So I'm looking forward to it. Any other comments regarding our birthday update? Seeing none.
Can adults?
Okay, Linda.
Can adults attend your workshops, or is it just for kids?
It's just for the TCAG has 10 kids that are members of the TCAG, and the library, the Thorold Library, is the second one I'm doing, and that is 10 kids that are registered with the library program.
Okay.
So this is a donation I'm making. I'm making a donation to the Thorold Library and the TCAG.
That's lovely.
Yeah, thanks. Any other questions, comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to 7.2. Partners for Climate Protection Program update, and I'm going to turn this over to Mark Freeman.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Just give me a second. Okay, so the first thing we should talk about is the action that we took at the last meeting, which was to review and respond to the delegation. That was on March 1st, our last meeting. So they presented a recommendation for the city of Thorold to rescind the participation in the FCM Partners for Climate Protection program. So we took a look at the presentation that was made by the delegate and the ECC BAC Advisory Committee. While we welcome public input and we want to thank the delegate for bringing forward her concerns, after a thorough investigation and analysis of the presentation material provided, the ECBAC, if I can call it that, ECC BAC Committee's PCP working group unanimously agreed that the sources of information referenced in the presentation lacked credibility, and the claims that were made were false, flawed, or at best misleading. As a result, the working group's advice to the ECC BAC Committee and Thorold City Council is to continue with plans to participate in the FDM PCP program. So I don't know if there's any questions or comments on that. If we need to, yes, go ahead, Matthew.
Oh, sorry, video's having an issue there. Oh, there we go. So I did just want to provide an update. So we were directed by council to reach out to the PCP program to set up a presentation, and we've confirmed them at present for May 28th, the council meeting. So what we're sort of recommending today is, now that we've got this coming back, Mark, I believe, circulated some information along with this on some questions. If the committee has any questions that they specifically have of the program that they would like answered, we can collect that information. What we'll then do is we're going to circulate it to the members of council and ask them for their individual questions. And what clerk's office will do is we'll compile all of that together, send it off to the representative, so that the representative already has an idea of the questions that we're getting from both this committee and from council, so that hopefully they can address as much as they can in their presentation. And then anything not addressed, of course, members of council will be able to ask questions as they would normally for that presentation. The 3-month period would bring us to June 18th, and I believe city staff will look at preparing a report that will come back for that council meeting at the end of that sort of 3-month period. But the presentation will just be for information. It'll be an opportunity for council to hear direct from them. But if this committee does have specific questions that they'd like us to circulate there, we can collect that as part of the information we send off to the representative.
Okay, so Mark's got this one page that was included, and this is info questions regarding the PCP program. So is this what we would be forwarding to council?
So there's a few different things that I put on there. So specific to Matthew's update, and thank you. And that's great to hear that we have the PCP representatives coming to council. That's great news. I will just continue on that theme then. So looking at the document that I provided, you kind of scroll to the bottom. The questions that I had that we had for the PCP program, I'm sure they're very similar to the questions that councilors are going to have or city staff are going to have. We talked a lot about, the last council meeting, they talked a lot about costs. So I'm sure the typical question is going to be around what are the costs associated with completing phase 1 of the PCP program. And I'm specifically asking on the paper here is, let's identify the difference, or ask the PCP people that differentiate the difference between completing phase 1 as a corporate level inventory versus a community level inventory. I think that's important. And then the second part of the question is regarding funding, and looking at if the FCM provides funding, or if they're aware of the provincial or federal governments, if they have grants to provide funding for staffing and other requirements to complete, at least at this stage, phase 1 of the PCP program. The last question I had was, what are the typical costs and benefits in terms of financial and otherwise, because this is really an exercise of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But I'd like to hear the PCP program people talk about the difference between doing a municipal level or a community level plan through all 5 milestones. So those are the questions that I had on there. I'll pause there, but if you're also interested, I will also share some information regarding some of the other activities being done by other municipalities and the region itself. That's okay? Okay. Scrolling back up to the top. So I'm not going to go through this line by line. It's getting late in the day here. But this is some information that's relevant to the council's PCP discussion that I thought would be of interest to the members of this committee. So St. Catharines, for example, they declared a climate emergency in 2019. Their strategic plan that year, and again, their renewed strategic plan, which was just done this year, both incorporate climate change into those strategic plans. So I thought that was worth mentioning. But skipping down a few bullets, specific to the PCP programs, the City of St. Catharines has completed phase 1, and they did it at the community level. They found that 40% of the community greenhouse gas emissions are coming from transportation and 39% coming from buildings. And they split that between mostly residential with some commercial as well. And then they had just under 10% from industrial sources. I should also mention that, unsurprisingly, 45% of community emissions are coming from the use of natural gas, and another 44% of their emissions are coming from the use of gasoline. Really no surprise there. In terms of their phase 1 costs, I was told, and in quote, staff time devoted to data collection, sorting, and compiling the information, which was mostly done by one individual. The city has a full-time climate change coordinator. I'm sure there was interfacing with other departments throughout that, but the majority of the time was spent by this person, who spends more than her time just doing the PCP program. She also has a number of other responsibilities.
Okay.
In terms of funding, the City of St. Catharines has received some funding from the FCM. However, it was not directly associated with the PCP program. It was for actions that they're taking to mitigate or adapt to climate change. So 2 examples. One was they recently received funding to build a new fire hall, and they're building this fire hall to Canada's new Green Building Code zero carbon standard. So they got funding for that. And then they also received funding for a water and wastewater management activity that they did. And finally, they also are working with partners such as Electra, the IESO, Enbridge, as well as provincial and federal governments on other funding sources on other projects. So definitely worth talking to them if the city wants to know how they're getting funded. I'll jump from there down to the township of West Lincoln. And again, they joined the PCP program in 2019. They have also completed a community level inventory for phase 1 of the PCP program, or milestone 1, they call it. They completed that late in 2020. At a high level, their phase 1 results showed that 58% of the community greenhouse gases are coming from vehicles, and another 39% from buildings. So again, it's natural gas and gasoline. I thought it was interesting to note that when they did their community level plan and they looked at the greenhouse gases that were coming from the city itself, the municipal buildings and activities, it would only impact about 1% of the city's total emissions. So I'm assuming they're moving forward with a community level plan, but I'm not 100% sure. So they're currently working on phase 2 and phase 3, which is setting emission reduction targets along with developing a plan. I do have some questions for them, but I don't know if that's really within scope of the activities that the city is doing, or if it's specific to the region. But I'll jump ahead and talk briefly about the region as well. Oh, first of all, Grimsby also joined the PCP program in 2021, but I couldn't find any information in terms of where they are in the program. So I don't know if they've completed phase 1 or not. But at the regional level, not specific to the PCP program, but we know that there is a Niagara Climate Change Action Network that are working on a number of things. They have 3 primary focus areas, one of which is the pathway to net zero. And late last year, they kicked off a climate change summit, which is going to lead to the development of a community energy plan. And a community energy plan will be driving plans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And so the expectation will be that municipalities will be required to create or modify their own official plans, CEPs, as well as green development standards. So along with, they're going to look at renewable energy sources, but it's also expected that a priority from this CEP will be focusing on zero emission buildings. So it makes sense that the city of Thorold is preparing for this NCCAN initiative, and the FCM PCP program provides the city the support that they need to be an active participant. So the only question I had for the region, if the city is reaching out to them as well, I do know that the NCCAN is securing funding, and I don't know what it's for. So the question is, will there be funding secured for the municipalities to participate in the PCP program or other activities that are going to be required as part of the CEP development? Now, I know that was a lot of acronyms and a lot of mouthful, but is there any questions or comments to that?
No, excellent work, Mark. I think you're doing a fine job. Any questions?
So the one question I had is, in terms of the action that we took at the last committee meeting to review the delegation that we had at the committee, is there any way to, or is it required to communicate that to City Council, what our findings were? Would that be appropriate?
Matthew, you've got your hand up. You're answering this?
Yeah, so I think what is reasonable is understanding the fact that staff do have to report back to council at the end of that 3-month period, which I'm presuming will be the June 18th council meeting, because that's sort of 3 months out from the April meeting where we had the discussion. And if between now and then there's any further comments from the Partners for Climate Protection Program working group, those could be gathered by staff through these meetings and just sort of incorporated as feedback directly into that report. So, staff will report on the use, and then any comments that this committee would like to share back to council for its overall consideration could again be included as part of that reporting. I think that's the most reasonable way to take it going forward. Again, with regards to the work that you've already put together and the information you've circulated, what we'll do is we'll circulate that to members of council and advise the members of council that if they have specific questions they would like us to add on to it, we will do so. We'll forward off to the program representative that we've been in contact with and just ask them to address as much of that as possible in their presentation to council in May.
Okay, good. Linda,
sorry, Joe. One comment I'll make though is this was the questions here were reviewed by a PCP working group and not all members of this committee. So if Councillor Longo or Linda or others had other questions to ask, then we can do it now or send me a note after.
Okay. Let's go with Linda. She's got her hand up.
Mark, after the presentation that you had in March, which you found that the presentation didn't have a lot of credibility, you made a motion. You had a motion or a recommendation, kind of in the like a motion, you had, and we could, do you remember about that presentation and that you recommended council continue? Has that's been presented to council because I assume? Or should we make that recommendation to council so that they're going to have a presentation in May from this working group, right?
Right. So the way I wrote up the assessment of our March 1st delegation was I was implying that we recommend to this committee as well as to city council to proceed with the PCP program. However, I believe what Matthew just said was that if that information is required to be communicated with council, it will be done so before the next, you said June, in the June council meeting, as part of all the responses to on the subject of the PCP program.
So do we need to make a formal recommendation, or because of what Matthew said, we don't need to make a formal recommendation?
So I'll jump in there, Mr. Chair. I don't know if you need to at this point. I know you have another meeting before the June 18th meeting, which will give this working group some additional time, as well as staff additional time looking into the program itself and the data or tools that they'll be using it for. So perhaps at the next ECBAC meeting, they'll have an opportunity to provide any questions answered direct to this committee. And if at that time the committee wants to put forward a motion recommending that to council, absolutely, you're free to do so. But whatever information you've pulled together, we'll send to staff as part of writing that report, just so the opinions of this committee are included in the recommendation that's put forward to council.
Okay, thanks, Matthew. Yeah, Mark, we need another working group update or meeting to gather our thoughts so we can make another presentation to this committee at our May meeting, and then we'll be on schedule, I think. Okay, I saw Councillor Longo, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm going to be quick here because I do have another meeting I have to get to, but I just wanted to thank Mark for the work he's done. And I'm not looking for an answer now, Mark, but you mentioned at the beginning that there were a lot of holes in the presentation put forward to council, and I picked out a few of my own, but I'm wondering if you would be providing council with a response to that presentation, or do you feel that's not appropriate?
Well, yeah, I am specific to the council presentation. It's only slightly different than the presentation that was made to the committee. So to me, it's the same answer. And the same advice that the PCP working group has come up with, which is that the presentation material, the sources of the material, lacked credibility, and that the points that they were making were false or at best misleading. So that information, I believe, should go to council. But again, we're circling the wagons.
You'd have to tone it down a bit.
But I don't think there's any other way. I mean, but what I don't want, well, I have no interest in having a point by point discussion. There's just no point.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, Mark. I think, but I think we somehow have to make council believe that there were many misleading and inaccurate points. But I don't know if you'll convince anybody or all, but I think that needs to be brought forward.
Yeah, I personally would prefer, sorry, Councilor Longo, if I could interrupt. Yeah, so I personally would prefer to see somewhat of a motion coming out of this session right now, because we've already done the assessment, and we have the recommendation for this committee and for the council to move forward, and based on that presentation. So I would prefer to see it be part of the record.
Okay.
Mark,
I agree.
Okay, Linda?
Mark, can you read your report, your motion? That can be made a motion, and I will support it.
Okay, so what I had written, what we had agreed on at the working in the working group was The ECBAC Advisory Committee welcomes public input, and we want to thank the delegate for bringing forward her concerns. That said, after a thorough investigation and analysis of the presentation material provided, the ECBAC Committee's PCP Working Group has unanimously agreed that the source of information referenced in the presentation lacked credibility, and the claims made were false, flawed, or at best misleading. So as a result, therefore, the working group's advice to the ECBAC Committee and the Thorold City Council is to continue with plans to participate in the FDM PCP program. So it's almost there. I don't know what we need to do to turn it into a motion.
No, you just say move that. So we start off with your last line, move that. Move
Matthew?
that
So I would move that the working group's advice to the ECBAC Committee and Thorold City Council is to continue with plans to participate in the FDM PCP program.
And I second that.
Matthew?
Yeah, my only comment, Mr. Chair, is timing of the motion. I don't want it and would recommend that it not go to council before council is ready to deal with this. If it goes now, it will land on a council meeting prior to staff's ability to report back on it. So council's not really going to do anything with it because they're still going to wait to hear back from staff, and there's still this presentation coming on May 28th. So perhaps what I'd recommend is I can assist you in just some of the wording of that motion so that it comes through appropriately at the May 2nd meeting. You can move it. And then what we'll do is we can time it so that it lands on the council meeting with the staff report so they can all be dealt with at the same time.
Good idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
You okay with that, Mark?
Yeah, thank you for the advice.
Okay. Okay, any other questions? Linda?
So is that motion going to go forward with the guidance of Matthew as to the timing? Matthew, you're muted.
All right, thank you. I'll connect with Mark offline just on the wording, and we'll bring it to the May 2nd meeting.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Do we need to vote on that motion?
It's not yet. It will be May 2nd meeting.
Our May 2nd meeting. Okay.
Yeah. Actually, I think the date might be wrong because May 2nd is a Thursday, I think. So it should really be May 3rd. Any other questions for Mark on this? Okay, seeing none.
Chair, I have to excuse myself, okay?
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you.
And thanks
Bye,
for your
everybody.
comments. Okay, let's go to item 7.3, Boulevard planting. There is an update on this that Leslie's not in attendance of the meeting, but Heather Swan, who has a landscaping business, Plant-Wise Design, she's been communicating with Kelly Liddycoat, who owns Boccia Finuso Funeral Home at the corner of Regent and Front Street. And Kelly has expressed interest in doing some boulevard planting on her property. It would be on the Front Street side, which would go from the sidewalk up to her metal fence that she's got, from the one driveway entrance to the corner of Regent and Front Street. She's reached out to the city and she's getting some, confusing and conflicting information from the city, but Heather knew that we were working on a boulevard planting bylaw, that we were trying to get something updated. So Heather arranged a meeting with Kelly and myself. I omitted Leslie from the meeting because it was too early in the morning for her. So we sat down and I listened to Kelly's concerns, and I indicated to her that this was an issue that was on our books and that she hold off with any more conversations with the city until we can get something going with modifying the bylaws. So after we get the Earth Day event finished, Leslie and I are both on the Earth Day working group and the Boulevard Planting working group. So once we get the Earth Day event out of the way, we'll get into this Boulevard Planting bylaw. Hopefully we can get something done quickly and then give Kelly some idea of how she can move forward. She has also indicated that she knows a few other business people who are interested in participating in some type of boulevard planting initiative on their properties as well. So any questions on this at all? Okay, seeing none. Committee long-term goals. I think, well, Mark and I talked about this last night with when we were talking about the Earth Day event with Mark manning the table, that any questions or suggestions we get from some of the participants at the event, we might just hold off on discussions with long-term goals right now until after the Earth Day event. And we can probably feed some of these ideas into the discussion going forward to see what is added to our goals besides what the committee is putting forward. Mark, you got your hand up?
Yes, agreed. That said, I was wondering if we should also re-solicit or recruit members to this working group, because I know that yourself, myself, and Leslie haven't been able to find the time because we're so busy. So I'm not sure if we should open it back up again and ask to reassemble members for this working group to develop the committee's long-term goals.
Okay, yeah, I hear you. What if we, okay, the Earth Day event is the 20th of April. We're going to have some comments. We go to our May meeting. When we get to the item on the agenda, we can look at what we have to address, and we can perhaps maybe try to get some other committee members at that time to come on board. Are you okay with that?
So you're referring to our next meeting, which is on May the 3rd?
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, and then we can plan ahead and see what our workload's going to be, and there's still, yeah, like you say, there's still we do have quite a bit on our plate right now with some of the committee members, so it would be nice to get a couple more people on board. Any further discussion on that? Okay, seeing none, let's go to roundtable discussion. Linda, do you have anything for the roundtable?
Me?
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
not right now.
Okay, Helen, do you have anything for roundtable?
Not yet. Thanks, though.
Okay. Joe, have you got anything?
I'm putting on my Lake Gibson hat for a second, and this is the last time I'll mention it at this meeting. It's specifically for Councillor O'Hare. It's too bad that Councillor Longo is gone. When our mapping thing comes to council, I want you to realize that at least the initial part where we get staff to help us with the boundaries and whatnot, depending on your point of view, is actually going to save the city money because it comes out of our grant that's already there, which in effect is money already spent, which saves money on staff. That's all I have to say on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Mark, do you have anything for roundtable?
Just to formally welcome Helen and Joe to the committee.
Absolutely. Councillor O'Hare.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nothing to add, but also to welcome Joe and Helen. Thanks for volunteering to join this committee.
Okay, thank you. Connor, do you have anything to add for a roundtable?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Okay. How about you, Jacob?
Just wanted to say one more time, if anyone has anyone else that they think might be interested in participating in the Earth Day event as a vendor or in any way, please reach out to community.services@thorold.ca is the best way to get in touch with me. Or you can call the city phone number. My extension is extension 312. Aside from that, thank you, everyone. I look forward to seeing everyone at the event, hopefully as well.
Okay, thanks. Jacob, did you, I forwarded a couple of emails to you yesterday, I think, from Habitat for Humanity and Niagara Community Gardens. Have you responded to them yet?
Not yet. I was tied up yesterday and most of the rest of today doing interviews for student summer positions, but I will be kind of working over the weekend as well and sending out some stuff later this evening. Not enough hours in the day, I guess.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, no, Kristen from Habitat for Humanity was just she wanted some information so they can start their marketing.
Okay, yeah, I'll make sure I get something back to her today.
Yeah, okay, great.
Thank you.
And then I forwarded you the slide presentation that Niagara Community Gardens does. Take a look at that, and then you can get an idea of what Niagara Community Gardens is all about.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, I don't have anything to add, so I'm gonna say that when I look at my calendar.
So, Chair, just to interrupt, it is a typo. It's May 3rd is the meeting.
Okay, thanks, Justin. Yeah, our next meeting will be held May 3rd, 2024. For adjournment, there being no further business, this meeting is adjourned at 12:20 p.m. And have a nice weekend, everybody.